Right guys, welcome back. Hope you're not too cold where you are. To be honest, it is bloody freezing here. The temperature has risen, mind you, risen to -4. It's fucking freezing. Anyway, so I hope you're nice and warm where you are. Now, as a result of the cold and whatever it is I've done to my arm, I haven't done a great deal of shooting over the last week and a half. I mean, we've actually had a week of freezing fog at one point, and it was absolutely, but anyway, yeah. So I have been perusing lots of videos online. And I have been looking into something which I've always found really, really interesting, namely the Mary Rose. Now, for those of you who don't know what the Mary Rose or what the Mary Rose is or was, it was Henry VIII's flagship, the flagship of Henry's Royal Navy, the nascent Royal Navy in the 1500s. And the Mary Rose, his flagship, it sank or was sunk. We don't quite know what happened on, I think it was the 8th or the 18th of June or July, I can't remember exactly which, 1545 or 46. One of those dates. Was never much good in dates. Now, as a result of that sinking and its subsequent recovery and archaeological salvage of it in the 1980s, we now have quite a good collection of contemporary, as in medieval, bows and arrows, medieval longbows and arrows to go with them. Now, prior to the Mary Rose, believe it or not, we had no examples of longbows anywhere in the country. There were none. There were no historical examples of a bow anywhere in the country. And we had, I think, maybe 2 or 3 arrows. The problem with the Winchester arrow, the problem with the arrows that we had is nobody was entirely sure what time period they came from. So even though longbow shooting was such a huge part of our history and culture, we had no examples of it, of the equipment at all, until the Mary Rose was salvaged. Now, as a result of that, it gave us over 2,000 complete and intact arrows, apart from the arrowheads, and I think it was just under 200 complete bows, minus the horn nocks, because the horn, for whatever reason, disintegrated, but the bows themselves were in perfect condition. They were boxed and still in unissued condition. Now, as a result of all the archaeological testing and the documentation and things like that, and some of them being tested to destruction by a select group of archery experts like Robert Hardy and people like that, we know, or we've got a pretty good idea, that the bows found were between 120 and 180 pounds draw weight. Various different lengths, various different sizes and all that sort of stuff, with a variety of draw lengths from 120 to 180 pounds in draw lengths, which I find quite interesting actually, but also a little bit weird, but we'll come back to that. We also have a wide variety of arrows ranging in length from 24 inches to 34 inches. Again, really interesting, wide variety of lengths of arrow, but still, I think, a little bit odd. Why do I find it odd? And this is actually the most interesting part about the whole thing. If you look at military history, if you look at all military cultures, going back as far as we possibly can, there is an awful lot of standardization goes on within militaries. If you look at, for instance, Roman military, standardized armor, the Lorica Segmentata, things like that, standardized shields, standardized weaponry, everything's standardized. It makes logistics a lot easier. If you come forward again to the Vikings and the Saxons, standardized shields, for instance. Vikings, fairly standardized round shields. if you come forward even further, the Normans standardised shields, the kite shield, standardised helmets, the conical nasal helmet, standardised chainmail. Everything was standardised because it makes logistics easier. If you have to replace equipment, it makes it easier. Edward I standardised lots of things to do with the military, including training and trading standards. Patterns were issued for arrowheads to be made so that we're all exactly the same, all standardised on particular types. And come all the way through to today, military equipment is standardised. That's where the word uniform comes from. Unified form. It's all unified. It's all the same. It's all standardised on patterns. And yet, the contemporary archery equipment from the Mary Rose, which we know dates to 1545, because that's the day the ship sank, is varied. Got a massive variation of equipment, from 120 to 180 pound draw weight, from 24 to 34 inch arrows. You've got to ask yourself why. Why would a military system allow such variety within itself when we know that everything else was standardized? And I think the answer to that question may be, now bear in mind this is just my feelings on the matter, and this is my opinion. They weren't standardizing equipment, they were standardizing performance. They were standardizing downrange performance, standardizing the effect that the arrows had on the downrange target. And that's the only thing that actually makes sense to me as to why there was such a wide variety of equipment, because it didn't matter at this end. What was important was at that end, so that everybody was shooting to the same range, so the arrows were landing at the same distance regardless of draw weight or draw length. Everybody was choosing and shooting the equipment to the same range. Now, I wonder whether, because these guys were basically sailors and they had spare time, were they cutting the arrows to their own personal length? Because we know when arrows were ordered by the kings of the time, or going all the way back to Edward, we know that the arrows were ordered all the same length, 32 inches, give or take. Depending on how they're going to be shipped, 30 or 32 inches. We know they were all ordered to the same length because the shafts were fitted into barrels to be taken to Fletchers. So they were all fitted into standard sized barrels, of which you got 144 dozen in one barrel, all cut to the same length, lid put on, they were all dried out in the barrel, taken to Fletchers and so we know that they were cut to a certain length. And yet the arrows found on the Mary Rose were of different lengths. Now I've been wondering, now for instance, perfect example of what I'm going to say now is my Scythian bow. Now at 28 inches, my Scythian bow draws 38 pounds at 28 inches. At 30 inches, it draws 36 pounds. At 30 inches, it draws 42 pounds. So for every 2 pounds of extra draw length, it gains 6 pounds in draw weight. Now we know that this is a fairly standard occurrence within bows, which can, so if you're drawing 100 pound to 28 inches, at 30 inches you might be drawing 120 pound in a long bow, or 140 pound in a long bow. People have actually, I've seen videos where people have actually gained 10 pound for every, 5 pound for every inch of draw length, 10 pound for every 2 inches, and more sometimes. So I was wondering if, for instance, if the average was 150 pound draw weight, measured at 28 inches, because that's the average draw length of your medieval archer, average bow weight of 150 pound at an average draw weight of 28 inches. that would give you X performance downrange. Now, in order to achieve the same performance out of somebody who can't draw 28 inches, somebody who can only draw 24 inches, for instance, your average person with a 28 inch or 28.5 inch draw length is 5'9". That's the way it works. Your average height for a medieval male in the 15th, 14th century was 5'9". That gives you an average draw length of 28 to 28.5 inches. Maybe 29, but 28.5 inches. So if you're shooting or if you're drawing a 150-pound draw, which is the average weight of the Mary Rose longbow, at 28 inches, what bow weight would you have to draw at 24 inches to get the same performance? Would it be 180-pound draw weight by any chance? So would 180 pounds at 24 give you the same sort of downrange performance as 150 at 28? And coming to the bottom of the range, would 120 at 30 or 32 give you the same performance as that 150 at 28? It's just something it just goes around in my brain. That's the way my brain works sometimes. So is that why we've got such a wide variety of arrow length and such a wide variety of draw weight in the equipment found on the Mary Rose? What do you guys think? Does it make sense? It makes sense to me. I mean, admittedly, there are other questions that come up as a result of that, which I could probably make another 2 or 3 videos on. But just as an initial idea, as an initial hypothesis, is it performance downrange that is being standardized by this variety of equipment? Otherwise, why not say to your suppliers, if for instance, if you were Henry the Fifth in the 100 Years' War, did he say to his bowyers, right, every bow has to be 100-pound draw weight? And if he didn't, why didn't he? Because we know that Henry VIII didn't, because otherwise every bow on the Mary Rose would be the same weight. Why is there such a wide variety of bows on the Mary Rose? Or was it because he knew who his archers were going to be, so he bought bows accordingly to equip that ship? The ship's company was 250 sailors and 150 soldiers, of which we believe 100 of those were archers, and the standard equipment was 250 bows, and I think it was 5,000 arrows was the standard equipment list. So were those bows bought specifically for specific soldiers on that ship? For instance, the Earl of Warwick in the 100 Years' War and the War of the Roses, he bought equipment specifically for each of his bowmen because he valued his bowmen so highly that he reckoned one of his bowmen was equal to 2 of anybody else's. Did we have a situation of individual units having archery equipment bought for individuals? That's another question. But anyway, I just thought I'd do that video. Something that's interested me for quite a long time. Admittedly, it does raise more questions than I've answered. But let me know what you think. Anyway, stay safe, keep slinging the sticks. We'll talk again soon. Cheers, guys.